Well, I mean, there's a lot to learn, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot to learn how courageous they were, because it takes something to go against the grain, to go against a society that demands conformity for certain kinds of roles, gender roles, certainly we know that, and that's loosening up all over the place today, but it didn't used to be that way. So we need to admire and respect what they did, but we also need to recognize how hard change is to come by and how easily it can erode. Because so many of the gains that have been won are starting to be eroded, and I think women everywhere see that, and there's a great concern about that, whether that's about reproductive freedom and reproductive rights. You know, the limiting of birth control now is something, how did that happen? You know, I thought Margaret Sanger, wasn't she the one that took care of that? Like 80 years ago? Why are we having this conversation again? So I think it's important to recognize that those kinds of rights and freedoms can really erode. It's a little, if I would use the parallel with the Civil Rights Movement and the Voting Rights Act, and how now what we see is legislation occurring in the states that is really limiting access to the polls, to the right to vote, in ways that we didn't imagine, you know, a few decades ago. So I think one of the important lessons of history is that it takes a lot to gain some rights, and you can get them written into law, but don't trust that it's forever. But that because you have to keep the pressure up, you have to keep the activism up, you have to keep the conversation out there on the airwaves, and you have to keep people everywhere engaged that care about human rights in society. Because really, you know, if one person's rights are undermined and jeopardized, somebody else's are in danger as well. So I think that's the lesson of history, is to note that with women and suffrage getting the right to vote, oh my word, what did it take, 40, 50, 60 years? That was a long time and a tough effort. And it never got us where we thought it would get us. And there's still always more work to do. But I think it can be eroded, and we need to have a strong vigil that that doesn't happen.